Welcome to the Redeemer Church podcast, where we share weekly sermons from our Sunday gatherings at Redeemer Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Let's listen now.
Would you all remain standing as we hear the word of the Lord from Luke 22:54 through 62. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. This is the word of the Lord.
I listened to this passage. Oh, good morning, everybody. Good morning. How rude of me. I listened to this passage several times, and just today when I was listening to it, I thought it was so funny that he says, "Man." It's like, "What's up, man?" And I have the Dwell app, and some of the readers really play into that. It's like surfer vibes, or I don't know. We can pause like we typically do here. We're going to be overviewing the life and relationship of Peter and Jesus today. And this is John's last account of their relationship. Hear these words from John. You can close your eyes, receive this, and pray. "Simon, or Peter, son of John, do you love me?" "Simon, Peter, friend, do you love me?" Take a few moments to think about this. Gracious and patient God, thank you for being here now. Thank you for the testimony of your relationship with humans like Peter. Give us wisdom and ability to see Peter, to see ourselves, and to see you today clearly. Amen. Wendell Berry is a farmer and writer, probably in that order. And he writes a lot about culture of many kinds, including agriculture, because he was a farmer. And I'm a sucker for a good essay or a group of essays, a book of essays. I love anthologies, I love readers. These are all the types of things that I like. So Christmas is coming up. You can start your list for me. And so I've been seeing Wendell Berry all over the place. This summer he's been all over the place, not physically, I'm sure, but just all over anywhere somebody's talking about Wendell Berry. And so when I came across this book, this collection of essays called "What Are People For?", I was instantly hooked. The title track, if you will, or whatever you call it, the chapter track, the chapter title, I don't know, is particularly powerful. What are people for? It's a couple pages. And he's talking about this trend since the end of World War II, that we collectively as a society or the government have a cultural stance. whether we realize it or not. This is very niche and very specific to his life. And this cultural stance is that too many people are on farms, and they should migrate towards the cities. I've lived like here my whole life, essentially. I do not think about farming much at all. So when he said, this is our cultural stance, I said, not mine. But he said that people should just migrate to cities. This is what the culture thinks, because farms are the least efficient way to make food these days. I don't know when he wrote this book, but farming seems even less efficient to make food than we can make it all in labs now, apparently. I'm no scientist. But then he says, it is apparently easy to say that there are too many farmers if one is not themselves a farmer. This push to cities, he argues, has caused a lot of the modern issues that we have, like higher rates of unemployment and people in need. It's an interesting theory, though I'm not an economist. Jonathan, where are you? You can solve this for us. He highlights this category of the vulnerable who is called the permanently unemployable. Whether by happenstance or design, are kind of siphoned off, they're put into their own, they're confined into their own space in the cities. You know these parts of town where the Trinity doesn't reach, that being Starbucks, Target, and Chick-fil-A, of course. And when he gets to the point of speaking about the vulnerable, he says this: what are people for? This is an important question that people all over the map, religious people, non-religious people, philosophers, not smart people, whatever they're called, have talked about for thousands of years. And while I don't plan on answering that question today, because you can tackle it from many angles, I want to simply say that if you want the hospitable life, you must ask yourself the question, what are people for? What are people for? And perhaps you're like me and you find every reason that you can to not get involved with vulnerable people, the stranger, the hurting, the poor. But you form opinions about them. You have things that you come up with and you point fingers, because apparently it's very easy to make conclusions about the vulnerable if you yourself are not the vulnerable. What are people for? We're in week 3 of our Rhythms of Hospitality series, where we've kind of taken the words of Matthew 25, Jesus from Matthew 25, as our guide, and you welcomed me. It turns out when it comes to the vulnerable, the poor, we're quite fickle people. We have programs and funding that get people elected only to be revoked and changed when somebody else is elected. And that money goes towards a different, maybe, group of vulnerable people. We make space for the vulnerable so that they don't invade, they don't come into our space. We give them money so we don't have to give them ourselves. We keep the problem over there, and we help from afar until we either get tired of it, forget about them, or get upset about the people that we're saying we're trying to care about or help. But it's the vulnerable who Jesus said, if we welcome them, we welcome him. If we love them, if we care for them, we are loving and caring for him. All this is why this phase of hospitality that we're talking about today is so important. We have these 4 phases of hospitality. They're handy-dandy with R's at the beginning. The first one that we've said, it's not us creating this, we've pulled this from a bunch of resources, is recognize. This attentiveness, this recognition of the people around us who are in need, who are vulnerable, who are the stranger. Talked about the woman that Jesus interacted with in the crowd, the bleeding woman, and she couldn't get beyond the recognition of Jesus. She knew that she could not be unseen. And then the next week, last week, Josh talked about responding, Jesus responding to Zacchaeus. Jesus was not stricken by inaction. And today we're talking about remain. Remain is a phase in hospitality for the same reason why hospitality does not happen, because it's incredibly difficult. It's not easy. It asks much of you, and it takes even more from you. And interacting with the vulnerable does not soon leave you. It makes you ask the question, what are people for? And today I want to highlight how Jesus remained with those he extended hospitality to, with one person in particular, and that is Peter. I'll give an overview of this relationship between the two of them, starting with their first interactions, then to their, shall we say, ebbs and flows of relationship, and then the scene at his arrest. We're introduced to Simon, who Jesus would nickname Peter, by Jesus going to his home. A quick introduction to seemingly one of Jesus' soon-to-be best friends. It's this man, Peter is this man that represents the human experience, who represents the complexity of life, and who represents us many times. This is their first introduction. Jesus left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon. Now Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked Jesus to help her. So he bent over her, and he rebuked the fever, and it left her. She got up at once and began to wait on them. Many people are interested to find out that Peter had a mother-in-law, with, if my math is correct, means that Peter was married. Some people suggest that he was perhaps a widower. The world may never know. Peter and their family are said to have appealed to Jesus to heal, and he did. So they must have heard about Jesus somehow before this. But as quickly as Peter is mentioned, he's quickly moved on from. And apparently this launches Jesus into a day of healing where all who had any who were sick brought them to him, and he healed every one of them. Peter's kind of like the first but the afterthought of the day. But Peter caught Jesus' eye. Matthew and Mark say that when they came back together, Jesus saw Peter and his brother Andrew. Luke says that Jesus hopped in the boat with them, probably to get away from this big crowd. Regardless of the reason why, Jesus did not miss this opportunity. Luke 5 is Peter and Andrew were out fishing all night. Fishing is a weird way to put it when you don't catch any fish. But Jesus rolls up in the morning and says, "Hey, why don't you just toss your nets in?" And Peter's like, "Hey, I don't think you know how this thing works. I'm the fisher guy here." And then, to everybody's surprise, probably except for Jesus, pull up the nets. You can't even pull them. There's so many fish. And this is from chapter 5. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." So they pulled the boats up on shore and left everything and followed him. Andrew and Peter following Jesus. Jesus sought out Peter. His attentiveness led to action, but it also led him to something else. And it was this conclusion that in each and every person there's this gaggle of joy and pain, of hopes and disappointment, of right here, right now, and past story. This is what Jesus saw in his soon-to-be friend, Peter. He saw a man who needed a big catch, whose mother-in-law needed to be healed, but he also saw more. There's this Polish-American poet. There's a lot of H sounds and no L sounds, so I'm not going to try it. But he wrote this. "Here walks a many-tiered man. On his upper floors a morning crispness, and underneath dark chambers, which are frightening to enter." Brokenness, vulnerability, dark chambers, they're all around us. Some readily visible on the upper floors, and some indeed underneath in the frightening dark chambers. And we often don't know what to do with this reality. Our hands are tied. The problems are too big to solve. But Jesus was not stricken by inaction. Because hospitality wasn't just something that Jesus did. It wasn't just a one-off thing. Christine Pohl is probably the best writer on hospitality that I've found. She wrote this: "Hospitality is not so much a task as a way of living our lives and of sharing ourselves. It's not just one-off acts, but a way of living." And some of the enemies to the hospitable life are that we leave as soon as things don't go as planned. We're disconnected, actually, from the people that we're trying to help. We live separate from them. Or more pointedly, we quickly forget the vulnerable people that we encounter. But Jesus had this ability and willingness to remain with people, And this began with his vision for human beings, that each and every one of us hold this complexity and are subject to change for better or for worse. The Gospels depict this dynamic relationship between Jesus and the disciples. We're mainly pulling from Luke here, but you can read in all four of them about their interactions. And there's many biblical figures that you can try to resonate with. Joseph, or maybe the holiness of Elijah, or the fervor of Paul. The rest of us find ourselves in figures like David or Peter, the more conflicted members of the Bible. Peter, this is Peter, who agreed to be a fisher of people, who is also the chief gatekeeper of who could come to Jesus. This is Peter, who assumed that the disciples knew better than the crowds, an assumption that Jesus did not always confirm. Peter, who stopped kids from coming to Jesus because he didn't want to waste his time with trivial things like people who talk too much, react on emotion, and just can't grasp what Jesus was trying to say. But this is the same Peter who honestly and vulnerably said, "Where else would we go?" And Jesus predicted that he would go. In 3 seconds, Jesus said, "You will never wash my feet." And then he said, "Thank you for washing my feet." This transfiguration of Luke 9, which stuck with Peter so much because how couldn't it, that he decided to write about it in one of his letters. He thought he was the Messiah. For Peter, the highs were incredibly high and the lows were desperately and painfully low. Peter would indeed leave Jesus like Jesus had predicted. Peter promised he wouldn't. And this is a moment that's incredibly loaded and fraught with complexity. It's from chapter 22. We just read this. Read with me. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he, Peter, denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Jesus extended his loving hospitality to Peter time and time again, a commitment that would cost him much. And in a moment of reciprocation or potential reciprocation from Peter, Peter felt that cost too much for him. I probably would have too. But this is the reality of hospitality that Jesus faced. That those who we extend hospitality to don't always see it the same way that we do. Henry Nouwen, who had kind of this incredible record of hospitality, said this: "When we think about hospitality, we tend to think about receiving guests, offering them a place to stay, a meal, a nice time. But as soon as we think a little deeper, we realize that hospitality is not as simple and obvious as it seems. More often than not, we will be rejected or taken advantage of, laughed at, or ridiculed, and still we are called to offer an open hand." Admittedly, when I picture myself having this hospitable life, rejected, laughed at, all this is not what I'm picturing. Stick with me for a second. This is my vision of the hospitable life. Maybe you share features of it. There's all sorts of people in my home. Not my real home, but my idyllic vision of a home. You know the type. Farmhouse, modern farmhouse vibes, Scandinavian interior design. It's functional, minimalistic, but not sterile. There's some kids' toys on the ground and dishes left uncleaned because hospitality is messy, but not that messy. I'm in control of the mess. It's my own curated mess. I have my homemade bread. There's lots of it. My cast iron is filled with some amazing chicken dish. And Leah and I argued whether we would put parsley in it or not, because I say it looks really good, and she says, I don't like the taste of parsley. But somehow we power through this mess. We power through the mess. And this eclectic group of friends come over, and we have a life-altering time. There is a temptation to curate the hospitable life, though I'm not sure what two things could be more opposed, hospitality and curation. This is the hospitality, this is the hospitable life without the actual mess. The real mess, when people say hospitality is messy, I think they're usually talking about what I was just talking about. But the real mess is the difficulty of caring for people that hurt and often not being able to help them, not being able to take away their pain. The mess comes from our own limitations to help. The mess comes from this discomfort that you get from what you see, what you hear, and what you smell when you live the hospitable life. The mess comes from unappreciated acts of hospitality. This is uncurated. You are not in control of this mess. And in my limited time, very limited time of practicing hospitality, I will say it feels less like giving and more like having something taken from you. First, what's taken is your vision of the hospitable life, and quickly followed by your comfort. You give whatever it is, and what you get in return is discomfort. Hospitality can beat you down. It may disappoint you. It will make you ask questions about yourself and others that you wouldn't have even known to ask before, like, what are people for? And it's in this space where we are offered a choice to either grow frustrated, jaded, and succumb to the life of keeping the vulnerable at arm's distance, giving up on hospitality, or we can embrace it for what it is. Or better yet, embrace the people that we're interacting with for who they are. Christine Pohl says, those who practice substantial hospitality live in the tension between finiteness and grace, heartbreak and miracle, tragedy and gift. When you're willing to embrace people, especially the vulnerable, the stranger, for who they actually are, not who you want them to be, or better yet, who you need them to be, the hospitable life of finiteness and grace, heartbreak and miracle, tragedy and gift is available to you. This ongoing embrace, this ability to stay, a willingness to remain with people is at the core of hospitality. And there's this part in the passage that we read today that has struck me this week. It's between Jesus and Peter, this interaction. It doesn't give much description, but much is said. It's verse 61. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And it says that he went outside and wept bitterly. I had this question this week that I was asking myself, and it was, what do you think Peter saw in Jesus' eyes? What do you think Peter saw when Jesus looked directly at him? Did they make eye contact so that Peter could not even stomach it? Did Peter have to look away? He knew that he had been given much, and he thought that maybe he had squandered it. Some assume that Jesus was looking on in judgment, some think disappointment, others viewed as a grace to Peter. Whatever was in the eyes of Jesus at the point of his arrest, it would not be the last time that the two would meet or look at each other. Jesus looked at Peter rather than ignore him, disown him, yell at him. He would see him again after his resurrection. He didn't chastise Peter. He didn't revoke his care and presence from him. He didn't tell Peter how ungrateful he was. None of that. He gave Peter this knowing look that did not close the door on their relationship, did not close the door on him. Jesus left this door to relationship open. He remained. This look, I think, is akin to what happened in the garden when God saw that first humans walking away and he made clothing for them after they were ashamed of being naked. It's this grace, it's this goodness of God in a moment of denial. It's graciousness, an extension of self-giving love, even when Jesus knew it would not be reciprocated or even appreciated. And whether we like it or not, this is the reality of the hospitable life. I want to give a caveat here, because there is real abuse, there are unhealthy dependencies, and I'm not unaware of those things. I'm not saying there's never a reason to end a relationship, never a reason to end one with a vulnerable person, but our culture is very shaped by this, I have to cut out toxic people in my life, or anybody who's not good for me. And we are also shaped by this desire to see quick results. I'm just going to go to this person and fix them really quickly. And if you make a habit of getting rid of everyone that isn't good for you, or the people that you can't fix, then you will not get to live the hospitable life. I want to close here. And this core conviction of mine that has developed over the past year since we started in the hospitality series, first one at the beginning of the year, and I've brought it up back in this one. It's this core conviction that I heard from Richard Beck. He's an author, professor first, and he says that we don't go to, or in these terms, we don't remain with the poor, the vulnerable, to bring God to them. We go to them to find God there, God already there with them. That, like praying or reading the scriptures or taking the table or singing or whatever you do to draw your attention towards the presence of God, to receive his presence, so do we remain with the vulnerable. It's this act that we have faith that God is there. Proximity and longevity with the vulnerable, with the poor, is almost like the sacrament itself, that God will show up here in some unique way. And when we let our comfort, our preferences, our prejudices, our fears cause us to leave, cause us not to remain with the vulnerable, we forfeit our opportunity to continually receive the presence of God, to see the presence of God in those very people. If I'm being quite honest, there are a few relationships that I've had that I've tried to extend hospitality to, practice hospitality in. And the ones that I've remained with, I have very much struggled to see God in them. I often ask myself questions like, where is God here? Where is God in this person? Or what are these people for? And I'm not exactly sure. There aren't these overwhelming changes happening to these vulnerable people that I know. There's not that many redeeming moments, to be quite honest. It's one step forward, 3 steps backwards, often. I haven't brought anybody out of poverty. I haven't laid hands on somebody and they've been healed. I haven't convinced somebody to be a Christian. So what are these people for? Whatever your answer to that is for the vulnerable people in your life, what are people for? What matters next is what you do with it. Why do you remain with people? Why do we remain? Why do we keep the door open? Why do we keep our hands, our hearts open? Because just like other practices, hospitality is a practice. Just like praying, reading the scriptures, it is a practice. And we engage in practices not because there's this formulaic or even like thing that's happening, or even just because we know that practices will form us. But we practice hospitality because in doing so, we are readying ourselves for the presence and movement of God himself. This faith that God is with the poor, with the vulnerable. So I want to be too. That's where I want to be. Because my friends who are vulnerable, in them I see me, and in me I see them. And I have to think that God is there somewhere. So I remain. I look them directly in the eyes. I see them for who they are and try to let them see me for who I am. And I wait. That's all I got. This is the only way I know how. Let's pray. God, thank you that you see us and that you respond to us, that you come to us, and that you stay with us. We are quick to leave, quick to wander off with you, with ourselves, from you, from ourselves, from other people. Would you give us patience? Would you give us longevity and a willingness to stay with people, whether they appreciate it or not? And would you give us a recognition of how you do stay with us as well? Thank you for this grace. Amen.